Okay, now let's take a look at the for each loop. But before we start with that, let me write a simple program with for loop, and then I'm going to show you how for each makes that program cleaner and easier to understand. So let's imagine we have a string called name. So var name equals, we set it to John Smith. So a string, as you know, is a sequence of characters. It's an enumerable object. It's like a list. So we can iterate over that. So now I want to iterate over this string, and I want to display each character on a new line. So I start with a for loop. So let's see what's happening here. This time I'm setting my counter variable, or I, to 0, because the index of the first character in a string is 0. And I'm going to increment I one at a time as long as I is less than the length of name. So as you see here, each string, like name, has a property called length, which returns the length of that string. Okay, now let's display each character on a new line. So console.writeLine, name of I. Pretty simple, right? Let's run the application. So that's the output I was talking about. Now let's see how we can rewrite the same code using a for each loop. So with for each, I don't have to worry about a counter variable like I. I don't have to set it to an initial value like 0. I don't have to compare it against some other value like name.length, and I don't have to increment it. So instead, we have a variable here called character, which in each step of the iteration holds one character of the string. Also interestingly, note that in the console.writeLine, we can simply display character instead of accessing the character at the given index in the name variable. Okay, now let me comment out our for loop. So with Control K and Control C. Now let's run the application. We got the exact same output. So whenever we have an enumerable object, like a string or an array or any kind of list, it's much easier to iterate over them using a for each. Let's change this example and iterate over an array. So I'm going to clean up everything here. Now I'm going to define an array of numbers, var numbers, and I'm going to use object initialization syntax to initialize that array with some numbers. So that looks like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. So with arrays, as you see, we have to instantiate them using the new operator. Okay, now let's iterate over this array. For each var number in numbers, console.writeLine number. Let's run the application. So as you see, for each is an easier way to iterate over a list.